Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and today I want to talk about a really pressing issue that emerges where technology and art meet. It's something that Star Wars will uniquely be affected by. Because as far as film franchises go, it's one of the older ones. It'll turn 50 very soon. And unfortunately, many of the original actors have either passed away or just too old to represent the characters that they once played. If only we had carbonite in our galaxy, ethical concerns aside, we could just thaw out actors when we needed them for something. Similar to what the Republic did to the Alpha Advanced Recon clone troopers in between battles during the Clone Wars. Now, Star Wars suffers a lot of problems because of its popularity. It's a blessing and a curse. Because of its popularity, for some fans, the original characters Luke Skywalker, Leia Organa, and Han Solo are what really make this series so special. To some fans, without these three, Star Wars means nothing. And a lot of this has to do with the comforts of nostalgia and the expectations that we build in our own heads, but it is a challenge that Lucasfilm will have to face nonetheless. Especially because in the current era, it seems like Disney is struggling to make a mark for themselves in the franchise and have to continuously go back to periods of time that were previously explored. Rogue One and the Andor series are probably the finest pieces of Star Wars work in the Disney era, but it's actually just the prequel to the original Star Wars film. And so naturally, you're gonna have some of the original trilogy characters running around in the background, which presents the problem. Now, in the old days, you were really limited in what you could do if an actor passed away or no longer wanted to play a character. You basically had to recast. I mean, God knows how many individual actors played the role of Hamlet, for instance.
To be or not to be? Not to be.
Very interesting take on a classic. Or better yet, be like the BBC's Doctor Who and build in a plot mechanism that allows you to change your main character's appearance every so often. I also really like the Halo route of doing things where you simply put a helmet on the character so no one ever gets to see their face. So it doesn't really matter who the actor is. In Star Wars, that's basically what they do with Darth Vader. He's had so many different actors portray him. James Earl Jones famously did the voice, bodybuilder David Prowse wore the suit first, Olympic fencer and fight choreographer Bob Anderson wore it next in the iconic Kenobi duel on the Death Star and the famous Luke Skywalker duel on Cloud City. Sebastian Shaw will forever be remembered as the first actor to show his face as Vader in Return of the Jedi. Then you have Anakin Skywalker actors with Jake Lloyd portraying young Anakin and Hayden Christensen, of course, as adolescent Anakin. Gene Bryant would make an appearance in the suit in Revenge of the Sith, and then in Rogue One, you had Spencer Wilding playing Vader and Daniel Naparis in the suit during what arguably is one of the most badass fight scenes in Star Wars, the Hallway Massacre on the Profundity. And I haven't even started talking about all the voiceover actors who, do all the TV shows and video games. Now, for the longest time, production just had to make do with whatever was given to them. That's just filmmaking. It's a lot of problem solving in the production phase. It's actually quite fun. But then something happened when humanity survived the Y2K apocalypse and the new millennium arrived. With the exponential increase in computing power, a new way of making characters come alive on screen became possible. Now, old actors could be brought back to life through digital manipulation. One of the earlier techniques of digital manipulation can be seen in Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, which featured groundbreaking CGI usage and a lot of blue screen. Actually, the whole thing was shot on blue screen, I believe. The only thing that had come even close to it at the time were the prequel films for Star Wars. What made this even more impressive was the fact that Kerry Conran, the creator of this movie, was completely indie. Like, he made a short film in his house, and it took around 4 years for him to just build a short and impressed, I think, Paramount enough that they actually gave him a budget for a full-length feature film. Kind of reminds me of the same path that Gareth Edwards of Monsters and Rogue One fame came from as well. Now, one of the more interesting things that Conran did with Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow was cast Laurence Olivier as the main antagonist, despite the fact that the famous actor had been deceased for more than 13 years at the time. Conran did this by using older archive footage of Olivier to composite him in a digital form. The film community's reaction were quite mixed. I think a lot of critics definitely did not like it. Some said yuck, found it disgusting. What I couldn't find is if Laurence Olivier's family or estate was paid for the usage of his likeness. Another voice actor was actually hired and did all of the voice acting, so you could technically say that this is a completely different, actor doing this work. If you guys know more about the behind the scenes kind of like legal issues of this of this scene here, please let me know. But anyway, this was just the beginning of the controversial use of digital technology to replace dead actors. Well, actually, in some cases, like in Gladiator in 2000, when Oliver Reed passed away abruptly during the filming, Ridley Scott had to compile some previous footage together to create an additional scene to make the film make sense. And so the scene where Oliver Reed is talking to Russell Crowe in prison is completely composited digitally. Notice how his face is being framed by those prison bars. This helps create this illusion that what we're seeing is real. Also, by making the lighting a little darker, it's easier to hide imperfection. This is done so well that the details went largely unnoticed. And I think that has a lot to do with Ridley Scott's eye for what works and what doesn't work. I mean, I'll take him with 20-year-old technology over a younger director with newer technology. Now, Fast and Furious 7 also did the same thing with Paul Walker after he passed away during filming in the passenger seat of a horrific crash. What a waste. They would use a combination of archive footage, cinematography techniques, and also Paul Walker's brothers, Caleb and Cody, would step in as body doubles. Actually, the whole story is kind of crazy. Instead of limiting Paul Walker's scenes in the movie after he died, they not only rewrote the script and included a tribute section, they shot an additional 350 scenes with Paul Walker, but not really Paul Walker. Yeah. It's almost as if they leaned into his death and wanted to challenge themselves even more. Now, the more cynical side of me believes that they probably just played this up to increase ticket sales. I think this movie did really well. And, seeing as Fast and Furious made 10 more movies than they needed to, well, I'm getting more cynical. But anyway, the point is, every time that I hear Wiz Khalifa's See You Again Now, I have to quietly whisper, Paul Walker. Now, Furious 7 came out in 2015, more than a decade after the earlier attempts to digitally recreate actors' faces. The technology was still not quite there, but the potential now could clearly be seen. People were starting to get the sense that it was only a matter of time that this technology would go from uncanny valley to photorealism. Another great example of this technology being used very well, I think, in my opinion, is a year earlier when Galaxy Chocolate revived a timeless icon in Audrey Hepburn, whose class and beauty has been frozen in time and therefore untainted and untouchable. Shot on the Amalfi coastline, this commercial just oozes atmosphere and captures classic Hollywood in a way that I think is just magnificent. In my opinion, Hepburn's beauty was always so otherworldly that the digital perfection that is often credited for creating the uncanny valley works quite well with her face. And from a technical standpoint, her skin is taut, she's young, and perfect. One of the more difficult parts of digitally recreating faces at the time was recreating the skin. A lot of times, these digital manipulations just looked too perfect. The skin was too clear, and there's really no movement at all, which again works with Audrey Hepburn, whose face is perfect. When Rogue One had started production and Star Wars fans figured out what the movie was about, there was a lot of speculation about which old characters would return back to Star Wars in live action, ranging from Vader and Palpatine. Actually, those two characters would be very easy to bring into live action. Now, there is one character, though, who is really closely associated to the Death Star, and Rogue One is about, of course, finding the plans of the Death Star, and that individual is Grand Moff Wilhelm Tarkin, portrayed by Peter Cushing. But Peter Cushing had passed away in 1994, and he is an older actor. He's been active for more than 6 decades. And I think a lot of newer audiences probably wouldn't recognize him, and they wouldn't have minded if Wilhelm Tarkin was just portrayed by another actor. But Lucasfilm went another direction. They used actor Guy Henry as the voice actor and also motion capped his face and altered it to look like Peter Cushing. This was made easier due to the fact that a cast was already made of Peter Cushing's face and then digitally scanned. It's kind of crazy that George Lucas actually prepared something like this so many years earlier. Now, I'd say that Tarkin actually looks amazing in Rogue One when you just take stills from the scenes, but when you unfreeze the frame and put it into motion, there's still something kind of odd in the movement of the facial structure, muscle, and skin. And this is a pretty controversial move. This is still a relatively new technology, and Rogue One was as high profile as a movie could get. But this was also a move that was ultimately done with the blessings of the Cushing estate. Disney did its due diligence and played it safe, legally speaking. And exactly how this all works from a legal standpoint is a bit confusing because this is something in America, at least, that is divvied to the state level. So you have 50 different answers for this question. For instance, 2 states, including New York, does not recognize a post-mortem right of publicity. Right of publicity is an individual's right to control the commercial usage of their own image, likeness, or picture. Now, in most states, you basically have anywhere from 10 to 100 years where you're giving exclusive publicity rights, or at least your estate is given that. And in Tennessee, thanks to the Elvis estate, that right is perpetual. Now, using digital manipulation to bring back dead people is still in its early stages, and I think Disney made the right move here by paying out, because using the technology already is very controversial. At least they did the right thing here and gave money to the family. A young Princess Leia was also recreated in Rogue One using the same technique, and Carrie Fisher reportedly thought it was just some old footage they had lying around. She also said she loved seeing herself regardless. Now, a few years later, Solo, a Star Wars story, was released. Harrison Ford famously disliked portraying the character and most likely didn't want anything to do with this film. I mean, Disney already had to pay him massive amounts of money to star in the sequel trilogy, and he doesn't do much in the sequels at all. And more importantly, Ford was just too old to be used in the Solo storyline, which takes place in the earlier years of the Corellian's life. I'm sure at the time they probably thought about de-aging Harrison Ford, but the technology just wasn't ripe enough at the time and cost way too much to capture. And so finally they decided that all they really needed was for someone to look just like Harrison Ford. Plus you had that controversy with Peter Cushing, and Disney was just not in the mood to revisit that. And so all they really were looking for was an actor who sort of looked like Harrison Ford and could recreate his vibe and charisma. Kind of impossible to do, honestly, because this generation, my generation, is a lot different from that generation. The charisma comes out in a different way. At the time, there was a short list of great actors, though, from Miles Teller, Ansel Elgort, and Dave Franco, and also one YouTube impersonator known as Anthony Ingruber, who honestly looked and sounded exactly like young Han Solo. He actually looked like Harrison Ford so much that he was cast in a Harrison Ford movie known as Age of Adeline, and well, you can see yourself how good he is.
All right, all it needs is a push start. Just lose the brake, I'll give you a push. Pop your clutch and you'll take off.
It's a great impression, but it still is an impression. Look at how stiff his mouth is. It's not like he's acting. It's like he's rehearsing a line he's already practiced a million times in front of a mirror. But still, it's a realistic portrayal of a young Harrison Ford, in my opinion. Heck, he looks more like young Harrison Ford than young Harrison Ford probably looked like. But I think Disney made the right choice by not just going for someone who looks and sounds like Harrison Ford. They went for the actor they believed could fit the role the best, and went with Alden Ehrenreich. In my opinion, he had a very solid performance, but a lot of purists also just couldn't accept his version of Han Solo, and the film tanked. A lot of people to this day still think Anthony Ingruber should have been in that role, but let me tell you, man, that impersonation would have gotten really old within like 5 to 10 minutes. And again, the CGI just wasn't there yet. We couldn't really de-age Harrison Ford like we could today, only 5 years later. Now, roughly around this time, the word deepfake started coming out all over the internet, most famously with that Tom Cruise guy. And instead of creating a texture of someone's face and then mapping it onto another actor's face, now you could just use an algorithm and it would do the process automatically. Heck, there are even open source software that could do this. You even had apps on your smartphone that could do this. Suddenly anyone could deepfake, and that presents a lot of issues for security for sure. But yeah, like for me, an individual like me, I could now hire an AI avatar to do all my hosting, and I can have an AI software generate the voice. I'm not saying I'm doing this, but how would you know? With AI-generated images seemingly everywhere now, it's not surprising that the recent actor strikes were not just about the growing influence of streaming services and how pay is structured, but also heavily focused on the effects that AI will have on future productions. Now, Star Wars actors are a bit split on how they view the use of AI to basically extend the life of their performances. James Earl Jones recently gave his voice to an AI company that will be able to reproduce his voice in all future Star Wars production, essentially making the voice of Darth Vader immortal. That same company also did some work on Book of Boba Fett and helped bring Luke Skywalker's voice back to his younger original state. While the portrayal of Luke in Book of Boba Fett was a bit better than when we saw him in The Mandalorian, and definitely a lot better than what Peter Cushing looked like in Rogue One, it's still a little bit uncanny valley for me. Mark Hamill did sign off on it, and even though he's quite tech savvy and used to doing quite a lot of CGI work himself,
be nice to know how much of a shitstorm we're flying into.
When asked about doing an entire Star Wars film, post Return of the Jedi, featuring Luke Skywalker but with face swap, he said the following: "It's unusual to see yourself like that. It can't be cheap. People say, oh, now you're going to be able to do a whole series of Luke post Return of the Jedi." I said, I don't think so. First of all, they don't need to tell those stories, but if they do, they could get an age-appropriate actor. Mark Hamill's a pretty humble guy, so it makes sense that he would want to move out of the way for the younger generations, but maybe it's also this perceived awkwardness and unnaturalness that makes Mark Hamill not want to be involved in a project like that. Plus, a lot of people think Sebastian Stan would be a great fill-in for Luke. He's got the looks and, more importantly, the skills as an actor. Coming from a production background myself, I've always said whatever tools you have in your toolkit, use them all and see what works the best. And sometimes I think the best technology is digital manipulation, face swap, de-aging, all these things. Now, I do applaud Star Wars for being cautious right now and slowly ramping up their use of this technology. And I think it's wise. They have to kind of wait for this technology to catch up. And also, the culture really needs to change as well. You know, my generation and older, we did not grow up in a period of time where you had people with fake faces running around. Like, this entire thought of AI replacing our faces is something out of a horror sci-fi film. So it is gonna take some really good examples of why we should use this technology to change our minds. And some of us, you know, we're never gonna change, and that's completely fine. But future generations who grow up seeing this technology, I don't see why they wouldn't accept it. Especially when the most talented creators and largest franchises begin to use this technology. Martin Scorsese is perhaps one of the finest storytellers of his generation. He is well respected for his ability to engage audiences and create extremely authentic retellings of characters from various periods of history. But he's also never been one to shy away from technology if it can actually improve his films or make it easier to make his films. And again, no one does authentic better than Scorsese. He loves film. He shied away from digital for the longest time. But when the time was right, he shocked purists by using a Canon C300 digital camera to shoot Wolf of Wall Street. And the C300 is a great camera, but it's a pretty low-level professional camera used more for fashion or documentary-style shooting. It does skin tones real nice out of the camera. But Scorsese loved the camera's ergonomics and low light capabilities, allowed him to simplify the shooting process, less grip, less lighting. It just makes things a lot easier. Scorsese is ultimately a storyteller, and he has a great eye for things. He's definitely not a Luddite. Although, when The Irishman was created and he used de-aging throughout the entire movie, I gotta say I was a bit surprised. Actually, George Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic had developed a proprietary capture system that didn't use markers or dots on the face of its actors, which further decreased the production time of using this technology. But again, if you look at Robert De Niro's face in this film, it's a bit stiff and weird looking, in my opinion. The skin is just not moving right. I actually think Scorsese, for the first time in his career, jumped the gun a little bit on new technology. But a few years later, that technology would fully mature when ILM would use the technology to de-age Harrison Ford for another Indiana Jones film. And the results are spectacular. I almost want to see another Han Solo film using this technology. Now, Harrison Ford reportedly said he is scared about AI's usage in the creative arts, but again, he's an individual who's already made his mark on the film industry. I doubt he's that scared, especially considering how much money he banked in his last Star Wars and Indiana Jones films. The thing is, whether we like it or not, AI is going to continue to change everything in our lives. And I gotta say, CGI is just like the tip of the iceberg. It's just the most visible part of this technology right now. Now, a lot of people want to stir up your fear about AI. It's an easy sell. It's a new, powerful, and unknown technology. But let me ask you guys, what do you do when you face danger? What do you do when you face down a bear or a gunman or some other crisis? You don't panic. You don't get emotional. You shouldn't freeze. You gotta open your eyes, assess the situation, and learn about the threat as much as you can before making a decision. And the same thing goes with AI. I think there are a lot of negative impacts AI will have on our world, but there are also going to be a lot of positive things. And the more you understand, the more you learn, the more you follow the breakthroughs that AI is creating in almost every industry, the better position you will be to take advantage of those things. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below. I'm not an AI. I'm not breaking. I'm just really tired. Yeah, I guess I'll see you guys next time.